A whisper can travel across a stone chamber with perfect clarity, a feat of design thousands of years old. Ancient architects mastered the hidden power of acoustics to transform sacred rituals into overwhelming experiences. This journey uncovers how forgotten builders manipulated sound to amplify spiritual power, making ceremonies resonate deep within the human spirit. By the end, you will grasp the sophisticated knowledge that let civilizations shape sound itself, principles that still baffle experts today. How did they build spaces where a single chant could feel like a divine presence? And why were these sonic secrets lost for centuries? What does it feel like to stand in a place designed to make the unseen world audible? Deep beneath the island of Malta lies a labyrinth carved from solid limestone, a place where sound behaves in ways that defy simple explanation. The Hal-Saflieni Hypogeum is a sprawling, multi-level underground complex, and within its deepest chambers, something extraordinary happens to the human voice. A single spoken word can transform, its echoes swirling into a sustained, musical resonance that seems to hang in the air. This is not a random acoustic quirk. The so-called oracle chamber is a masterpiece of design, its walls and ceiling shaped to amplify specific vocal frequencies, particularly the low harmonics of a chanted tone. It feels less like a room and more like a living instrument built from stone. This three-level structure, used over 4,000 years ago, represents one of humanity's first great experiments in architectural acoustics. The builders possessed no formal physics, no oscilloscopes or sound meters. Theirs was an intuitive genius, a deep-seated knowledge gained through trial and error, listening and learning how sound waves travel, reflect, and amplify within an enclosed space. They understood that by carving a chamber to precise proportions and smoothing its surfaces to specific angles, they could control the very texture of sound itself. Archaeologists like Simon Stoddart argue this was a deliberate, conscious choice. The goal was not merely to make voices louder, but to change their fundamental quality, to make them otherworldly. In the flickering torchlight of a ritual, a priest's chant would not just be heard, it would be felt, vibrating through the bones of the participants. This sonic manipulation served a profound social and spiritual function. It blurred the line between the human and the divine, making the community feel as though they were in the direct presence of supernatural forces. This was the dawn of a new relationship between humanity and its environment. It marked a pivotal shift from simply inhabiting a space to actively shaping it, to weaving invisible forces of vibration and resonance into the very fabric of sacred architecture. The knowledge forged in these dark, echoing halls would not be lost. Instead, it became a foundational blueprint, a secret whispered through the stones, waiting to be rediscovered and refined by the civilizations that followed. The principles that made the oracle chamber so powerful were not unique to Malta. Across the ancient world, master builders independently discovered the same invisible laws of sound. They learned to harness three fundamental forces: resonance, reflection, and reverberation, using nothing but stone, geometry, and an acutely trained ear. Resonance is what happens when a sound wave finds its perfect match in a space, causing the air itself to vibrate in sympathy, amplifying a specific pitch. Reflection is the way sound bounces off surfaces, much like light off a mirror. And reverberation is the persistence of sound, the way it lingers and blends together in an enclosed space. Think of the difference between a shout in a padded room and a whisper in a vast, empty cathedral. The architects of antiquity sought to create that cathedral effect, manipulating these forces to make the human voice seem larger than life. The ancient Greeks were perhaps the most celebrated masters of this acoustic art. Their open-air theaters carved into hillsides are marvels of sound projection. The key was the semicircular shape and the stepped stone seating. These concave surfaces acted as a giant acoustic mirror, catching the voices of actors on the stage and focusing that sound energy upward, sending it clearly to the very last row, hundreds of feet away. A spectator in the top seat could hear a line delivered in a normal speaking tone with perfect intelligibility, a necessity for the complex tragedies and comedies performed there. This was not magic, it was precision engineering achieved through centuries of observation. This sophisticated understanding of acoustics was a global phenomenon. Scholars like David Lubman have studied how the Mayans designed their towering, steep-stepped pyramids. The grand staircases of these structures act as massive sound diffusers, breaking up the echoes that would normally create a muddy roar in a large plaza. This allowed the chants and declarations of a priest standing at the summit to be heard with startling clarity by the thousands gathered below. In Egypt, the inner chambers of the Great Pyramids and certain temples feature incredibly long reverberation times, where a single clap can echo for more than 10 seconds. This created a disorienting, immersive soundscape that transformed a pharaoh's decree into an eternal, ringing command from the gods. How did they accomplish this without oscilloscopes or mathematical formulas? The answer lies in a profound, patient process of trial and error. A builder would shape a chamber, then listen. They would chant, they would strike stones, and they would note how the sound behaved. Over generations, this accumulated, experiential knowledge was passed down, a secret craft of shaping space to control an invisible force. The ultimate goal was always more than mere audibility. It was about manufacturing awe. When a priest's voice was suddenly amplified by the very stones around him, or when a chant swelled into a thunderous chorus through resonance, it did more than convey a message. It demonstrated a tangible connection to the divine, reinforcing the spiritual and political authority of the leader who seemed to command the elements themselves. The architecture itself became a participant in the ritual, a silent partner in a grand performance of power. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, the oracle of Delphi spoke with a voice that was not entirely her own. Within the temple's inner sanctum, a chamber called the Aditon, the priestess known as the Pythia would inhale sweet-smelling vapors rising from a crack in the earth. As she slipped into a trance, her fragmented words and murmurs were not merely heard by the attending priests. They were transformed. Historians and archaeologists, including John R. Hale, suggest the chamber itself was an acoustic instrument. Its stone walls, carefully curved and positioned, would have captured the Pythia's voice, reflecting and magnifying her utterances into a resonating echo that filled the small space. This was not simple amplification. It was a distortion of the human voice, making her cryptic phrases seem to emanate from the stone itself, a divine whisper layered with multiple echoes. The combination was a powerful, psychological cocktail. The intoxicating geological gases likely induced a lightheaded, altered state in the priestess, a genuine physiological reaction. But it was the acoustics that performed the real magic for the audience. The echoing, resonant soundscape made her words feel unearthly, as if the room itself was speaking. This sonic manipulation was the crucial link in the ritual chain. It took the ambiguous sounds of a woman in a trance and gave them a tangible, awe-inspiring presence. The priests who interpreted her speech were not just translating language, they were interpreting an event, a supernatural phenomenon made audible through architectural design. The reputation of Delphi, the so-called navel of the world, rested not just on the prophecies, but on the overwhelming sensory experience of receiving them. The architecture served to authenticate the divine connection, making the intangible power of the gods feel immediate and real to the supplicants who traveled from across the known world. This demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of human psychology. The builders of Delphi, whether by accident or brilliant design, created a system where geology and acoustics worked in concert to produce an undeniable spiritual event. The legacy of the oracle underscores a profound truth about these ancient spaces. The goal was never just to make a voice louder. It was to change its very nature, to strip it of its human origin and cloak it in the power of the divine. This deliberate blurring of the lines through sound is what made the ritual so convincing and its influence so enduring. The same mathematical principles that govern the harmony of music were etched into the very stones of ancient monuments. Far from arbitrary, the dimensions of sacred spaces were calculated with a precision that suggests an advanced understanding of sound's relationship to form. In the Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, the king's chamber is not just a room, it is a resonating box. Its walls are constructed from precisely cut granite, and its dimensions are believed to reflect the golden ratio, a mathematical proportion found throughout nature, from the spiral of a nautilus shell to the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower. This ratio, approximately 1.618 to 1, is not merely aesthetically pleasing. When applied to architecture, it creates a space where sound waves interact in a uniquely harmonious way. The chamber's shape and proportions naturally amplify and sustain specific, low-frequency sounds, turning a chant or a drumbeat into a rich, enveloping hum that vibrates through the body. Experts like Robert Temple propose that this was a deliberate fusion of science and spirituality. The builders saw these perfect geometric forms as a bridge to the cosmos, a way to align human ritual with the fundamental order of the universe. In this view, sound was not just a byproduct of ceremony, it was the active medium, the vibrating energy that traveled across that bridge. The pyramid's passages and chambers were not just architectural features, they were a carefully tuned instrument designed to generate specific harmonic frequencies. This interplay between form and function reveals a breathtaking level of planning. The ancient architects understood that a sound wave is a physical force, and that by controlling the shape of the space it travels through, they could control its behavior. A curved wall would focus sound like a lens, a corbelled ceiling would diffuse it, and a chamber built to the golden ratio would make it sing. This was the ultimate integration of math and mysticism. The goal was to construct an environment where every spoken word, every note of a ritual hymn, was automatically enhanced and transformed by the architecture itself. The stone became a collaborative voice in the ceremony, a permanent participant that ensured every ritual achieved its maximum psychological and spiritual impact, resonating not just in the ears of the attendees but deep within their souls. Across the Atlantic, the grand plazas of Mesoamerica were also designed to speak. At the ancient Maya city of Chichen Itza, the Great Kukulkan Pyramid holds a remarkable secret. If you stand at the base of its massive staircase and clap your hands, the sound that returns is not a simple echo. It is a sharp, undulating chirp that perfectly mimics the call of the sacred Quetzal bird, a creature deeply intertwined with the feathered serpent god Kukulkan, for whom the pyramid is named. This is no coincidence. The work of acoustics researcher David Lubman demonstrates that this auditory phenomenon is a direct result of the pyramid's design. Each of the step terraces acts as a sound diffuser, but the staircase itself functions like a finely tuned instrument. The sound waves from a clap travel up the steep stairs, hitting each step at a slightly different time. These staggered reflections cascade back to the listener not as a single slap, but as a rapid series of pulses that our ears perceive as a distinct musical chirp. The builders achieved this by calculating the precise height and depth of each step to create this specific acoustic filter. Imagine the impact during a grand ceremony. A priest at the summit would raise his arms, and as the crowd below clapped in reverence or as drums were struck, the very temple would answer with the voice of a divine messenger. This transformed a public ritual into a participatory dialogue between the people and their gods. The sound was a tangible symbol, a confirmation that the deity was present and listening. This intentional design extended beyond the pyramid itself. The vast, open plazas were not just spaces to hold crowds, they were carefully shaped sonic environments. The placement of platforms and the angles of surrounding structures were arranged to control how sound traveled across thousands of people. Chants and music would have been reflected and blended, creating a rich, immersive soundscape that enveloped the entire community. This shared auditory experience forged a powerful collective identity, making every participant feel connected to both the spiritual narrative and to each other. The architecture was not a silent backdrop. It was an active voice in the ritual, using the physics of sound to breathe life into cultural stories and cement spiritual beliefs in the memory of all who were there. The stone itself was chosen for its voice. Ancient builders understood that the materials they used were as important as the shapes they carved, each rock and timber possessing its own unique acoustic signature. Limestone, found in the Maltese Hypogeum, is relatively soft and porous. It absorbs the highest frequencies, allowing the deeper, resonant tones to linger and swell, creating that sustained musical hum. Granite, like the massive slabs in the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, is incredibly dense and non-porous. It acts as a nearly perfect reflector, causing sound to bounce back with immense power and creating those long, disorienting reverberations. Wood, used in temples and longhouses across the ancient world, adds warmth, its fibrous structure softening harsh echoes while still carrying sound clearly across a space. This was not a haphazard selection. It was a deliberate orchestration of sonic texture. Materials scientist Trevor Cox explains that by mixing these materials, ancient architects could effectively tune a room. They could decide which frequencies would be amplified and which would fade, tailoring the acoustic environment for a specific ceremonial purpose. A chamber meant for cryptic oracles might use highly reflective stone to create confusing echoes, while a space for meditative chanting would use sound-absorbent stone to allow a pure, low tone to dominate. This principle extends to the great stone circles of Northern Europe. The towering blue stones of Stonehenge, transported over great distances, are not just visually distinct. When struck, they produce a range of deep, metallic rings and duller thuds, a veritable lithic orchestra. Archaeologists like Steve Waller suggest these unique sonic properties were integral to the rituals performed there. Imagine a ceremony under the vast sky where priests or shamans struck these massive stones in a complex rhythm. The resulting sound waves, a cascade of overlapping tones and frequencies, would have been physically felt by the participants. This sonic immersion, this rhythmic vibration traveling through the earth and air, could induce altered states of consciousness, blurring the line between the physical world and the spiritual realm. The architecture was not just seen, it was played. The very act of building was an act of composing a permanent musical instrument on a monumental scale. This careful curation of materials allowed for the amplification of even the most subtle sounds, a faint whisper, the rustle of ceremonial robes, the gentle tap of a drum. By controlling the sonic minutiae, these forgotten engineers could control the emotional tenor of a ritual, guiding the hearts and minds of the community toward a shared, transcendent experience. The legacy of their material innovations is etched into our world today, with modern concert halls and recording studios still applying these ancient principles, seeking that perfect blend of reflection and absorption that turns simple sound into something that moves the human soul. The vast stone forests of Karnak and Luxor were more than monuments, they were sonic engines. As priests processed through the towering colonnades, their chants did not simply fade into the air. The long, parallel rows of massive pillars acted as acoustic waveguides, capturing the sound of their hymns and channeling it forward, amplifying it with each reflection. The journey of a chant began in the open, sun-baked courtyard, growing in power as it was funneled into the dim, narrow halls, and finally erupting into a thunderous resonance within the enclosed sanctuary. This was not an accident of design. It was a deliberate manipulation of space to manufacture a sense of impending revelation. Inscriptions found within these temples describe the rituals in detail, often mentioning the overwhelming nature of the sound, a divine force that filled the sacred space. Priests were not just spiritual leaders, they were the operators of this immense acoustic instrument. They knew precisely where to stand, how to project their voices, and which hymns would trigger the most powerful reverberations. Their chants, amplified and transformed by the stone, seemed to be answered by the gods themselves. As Egyptologist Richard H. Wilkinson has observed, this sonic mastery was often paired with celestial alignment. The inner sanctum, the holiest chamber where the god statue resided, might be positioned so that the light of the rising sun or a specific star would illuminate it at a key moment in the ritual. When this visual spectacle was combined with the overwhelming, echoing chant of the priests, the effect was psychologically devastating. The connection to the divine felt not just symbolic but physically, audibly real. The architecture created a multi-sensory trap for the human mind, blending light, sound, and space into a single, transcendent experience. An ordinary ceremony became an encounter with the eternal, proving the Egyptians' profound understanding that to control a space was to control the experience of belief. This sophisticated orchestration of the senses reveals a civilization that viewed its temples not as silent tombs, but as living, breathing instruments of spiritual power. A gentle murmur can cross the immense void beneath the great dome of the Roman Pantheon with perfect clarity. This is the magic of a whispering gallery, an acoustic phenomenon where the curved wall of a vast space carries a whisper along its surface, delivering it directly to a listener standing far across the room. In that sacred space, a priest could stand at one point, utter a secret prayer or a divine pronouncement in a hushed tone, and have it heard with startling intimacy by another initiate at the opposite side. This was not a parlor trick, it was a carefully engineered feature of ritual. The dome's perfect hemispherical shape acts as a continuous sound mirror, guiding the sound waves along its curve without allowing them to dissipate into the open space. Architectural historians like Axel Vollmer see these ancient galleries as brilliant precursors to modern acoustic engineering, demonstrating a clear, if intuitive, grasp of how sound waves propagate and reflect. For the participants in a Roman ceremony, the effect was profoundly mystical. A whisper, a sound meant for a single ear, could traverse a space built for thousands, creating an intensely personal connection within an overwhelming public spectacle. This auditory illusion made it seem as though the gods themselves were whispering secrets directly into the hearts of the faithful, or that the temple was alive, carrying hidden knowledge on its very breath. That intimate sound crossing a colossal distance would have intensified every ritual, binding the community together through a shared, awe-inspiring secret. It reinforced the authority of the religious leaders who seemed to command the very air, turning architecture into an active agent of belief and social cohesion. That persistent, resonant hum was a gateway to another world. Ancient rituals relied on sound not just for communication, but for transformation, using architectural acoustics to deliberately alter human consciousness. Across cultures, from the shamanic drum circles of Siberia to the Neolithic enclosures of Europe, we find a universal understanding. Repetitive sound, when amplified and sustained by the right space, can shift the very state of the mind. The steady, driving beat of a drum in a circular stone chamber does not simply fill the air, it begins to command the brain. The rhythm creates a sonic pulse that the brainwaves themselves start to follow, a process known as entrainment. Neuroscientist Oliver Sacks documented how rhythmic auditory stimulation can slow the brain's dominant beta waves, associated with active focus, down into the more relaxed alpha state, and even further into the dream-like theta waves of deep meditation and trance. In this altered state, perception changes. The boundaries of the self can feel less distinct, time may seem to stretch or collapse, and sensory experiences become intensely vivid. This is the psychological mechanism that ancient architects leveraged with such incredible skill. They designed chambers that would maximize the persistence of these rhythmic sounds. A single drumbeat in a stone circle would not just echo, it would smear into a continuous, throbbing drone, layering over the next beat and the one after that. The space itself became a second drummer, holding the note and creating an inescapable, immersive sonic environment. Participants were not just hearing the ritual, they were being physically and neurologically absorbed by it. The architecture ensured there was no escape from the sound, allowing it to bypass conscious thought and speak directly to the deeper, older parts of the brain. This was not an accidental side effect. It was the entire purpose. The goal was to use the physics of sound and space to engineer a spiritual journey, to dissolve the ordinary perception of reality, and allow the community to collectively experience what felt like contact with the spirit realm. The stones were not a backdrop, they were an active component of the ritual, a co-conspirator in guiding the mind across a sacred threshold. This deep connection between acoustics and consciousness reveals the true genius of these forgotten builders. They were not merely engineers of stone, but pioneering psychologists of the human spirit. This sensory immersion reaches its most profound form deep within the earth. The dark, silent world of underground chambers was not a void but a canvas for sound. In places like the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, the very rock seems to breathe with low vibrations. A drumbeat or a deep, chanted tone within these spaces does not merely travel through the air, it travels through the stone floor and the bones of your feet, rising up through your skeleton until you feel the sound more than you hear it. This full-body resonance transforms the chamber from a room into a living entity. For cultures that used these subterranean complexes for burial rituals, this physical vibration could have been understood as the voice of the ancestors themselves, a tangible presence shaking the world of the living. The architecture guides this experience with incredible precision. Narrow, twisting corridors act as acoustic filters, stripping away high-frequency noise before sound enters a larger chamber. Curved walls and carefully carved niches then reflect and focus the remaining low frequencies, creating pockets of intense resonance. You do not just stand in this sound, you are submerged in it. Researcher Linda Enix and her team have taken scientific measurements in these ancient sites, revealing a stunning correlation. They found that many of these chambers resonate most powerfully at frequencies around 110 Hz, a low, droning hum. At this specific pitch, scientific studies have shown the human brain can undergo a shift. It is a frequency that has been linked to reduced activity in the brain's language centers, potentially quieting the internal monologue of the mind while simultaneously promoting states of calm focus or heightened arousal. Imagine the implication during a burial rite. As the community gathered in the flickering torchlight, the rhythmic chanting and drumming would not just be a memorial, it would be a neurological event. The architecture, working in concert with the ritual sounds, would gently guide every participant into a shared, altered state of awareness. In this collective trance, the boundary between the living and the dead would feel porous, thin. The felt vibration became proof of a connection, a communion facilitated by the ancient architects who carved not just stone, but experience itself. They understood that to truly speak to the spirit, you must first speak to the body, using the hidden power of acoustics to make the unseen world feel undeniably, physically real. The earth itself was the first acoustic architect. Ancient builders did not merely construct against the landscape, they listened to it, identifying natural features that already possessed powerful sonic properties and weaving them directly into their designs. A cave system with a resonant echo was not just a shelter, it was a ready-made temple. A cliff face that reflected sound across a valley became a natural amphitheater. This deep integration transformed static architecture into a living, breathing system that responded to the rhythms of the natural world. The vast underground city of Derinkuyu in Turkey presents a compelling example. Its labyrinthine tunnels and chambers descend multiple levels deep into the volcanic rock. While its primary purpose was defense and shelter, its sophisticated network of ventilation shafts suggests a dual function. These narrow, vertical channels, essential for bringing fresh air to thousands of inhabitants, would have also acted as perfect sound conduits. A voice or a drumbeat from a central chamber could travel vertically through these stone tubes, carrying clear, muffled communications to different levels of the city. During a communal gathering or a clandestine ritual, the sound would seem to emanate from the very rock, connecting the community through an invisible auditory network. This harmony with the environment created dynamic soundscapes that were never the same twice. A ceremony held near a waterfall would be underscored by the constant, thunderous roar of water, a sound that could mask all other noise and induce a powerful trance state. A temple positioned to catch the wind would have its own voice, with gusts whistling through specially carved holes or gaps in the stones, creating an unpredictable, haunting melody that changed with the weather. This variability was not a flaw, it was a feature. It meant that each ritual was unique, guided by the whims of nature, making the divine presence feel immediate and responsive. Acoustic expert Barry Blesser describes this as a holistic worldview, where human construction was not separate from nature, but a collaborative partner with it. The goal was to amplify spiritual experiences by tapping into the existing power of the world. The architecture did not seek to dominate the landscape, but to complete a circuit, allowing the voice of the ceremony to join the eternal sounds of the earth, wind, and water. This seamless fusion meant that every ritual was a dialogue not just with the gods, but with the living planet. The rising sun at Newgrange does more than just illuminate a dark chamber. For a brief window during the winter solstice, a narrow beam of light travels down a long, stone-lined passageway, precisely striking the central tomb. At this moment of celestial alignment, something else happens. The same stone surfaces that channel the sun's rays also shape the journey of sound. A chant or a drumbeat within the chamber during this event would not echo randomly. The carefully angled walls and the high, corbelled roof reflect and focus the sound waves, amplifying them in a way that is uniquely tied to the solar event itself. This was a multisensory ritual engineered into the very bones of the landscape. Archaeoastronomer Clive Ruggles suggests this was no coincidence. the alignment was part of a profound symbolic system where light and sound worked in concert. The sun's rebirth was not just witnessed, it was heard. The returning light was accompanied by a transformed acoustic environment, a sonic signature that marked this as a sacred moment unlike any other. This integration reveals a breathtaking level of planning. The ancient architects of Newgrange were not just building a tomb, they were programming an experience. They understood that the most powerful rituals engage more than one sense, creating a layered, overwhelming confirmation of the divine. The structure became a clock, a calendar, and a concert hall, all fused into one. It mediated between the earthly and the cosmic, using the predictable movements of the heavens to trigger an unpredictable, awe-inspiring sensory event for the community gathered inside. This multifaceted approach shows a holistic vision where astronomy, acoustics, and architecture were not separate disciplines, but intertwined threads in a single grand design to make the intangible forces of the universe feel vividly, undeniably present. But the stones themselves were not simply carved, they were tuned. Some ancient builders mastered the art of creating Helmholtz resonators, a complex acoustic device we associate with modern physics. Imagine a ceramic pot, its neck carefully shaped to a precise diameter, its body hollowed out to an exact volume. When sound waves of a specific frequency pass over the opening, the air inside the pot vibrates intensely, absorbing that particular tone from the environment and resonating with a pure, clear hum of its own. This is not magic, it is a principle of physics, yet ancient artisans were creating these resonators from stone and clay long before the science was formally understood. They embedded these tuned vessels within walls or buried them beneath floors, creating an invisible network that filtered and purified sound. A room treated with these resonators could have harsh echoes silenced, while the desired chanting frequencies were amplified into a smooth, resonant drone. This was acoustic engineering on a molecular level, a deliberate sculpting of the air itself. Water, too, became a tool for shaping sound. In the grand Roman bath complexes, the flow was not merely functional. The precise angle of a water channel, the height of a waterfall, and the shape of the basin it fell into were all calculated to produce a specific sonic texture. The goal was a constant, soothing backdrop of white noise, a cascade of sound that masked distracting street noise and induced a state of deep calm, enhancing the therapeutic and spiritual rituals of the bath. This knowledge was not written in codexes. It was an oral tradition passed from master to apprentice through whispered secrets and hands-on demonstration. A builder learned to listen with his entire body, to feel the vibration in the stone, and to shape it by ear and by instinct. With the collapse of empires and the scattering of these guilds of master craftsmen, this nuanced understanding evaporated. The techniques for tuning a chamber or directing water song were simply forgotten, leaving behind only the silent, enigmatic structures. Modern acoustic archaeologists are now trying to reverse engineer these lost arts. By creating digital models and physical reconstructions, they are uncovering the stunning sophistication hidden in plain sight. This fragile legacy reminds us that innovation is not always a forward march. It can be a whisper on the wind, a secret held in the curve of a stone, easily lost to time if we do not listen closely enough. The sheer scale of the Theatre at Epidaurus could make a single, unamplified voice seem impossibly small. Yet from the circular orchestra floor to the highest tier of seats, every word spoken on that stage carried with perfect, resonant clarity. This was not a happy accident of design. The semicircular bowl, carved into the hillside, and its 55 rows of limestone seats functioned as a single, giant acoustic instrument. Each stepped bench acted as a filter, breaking up and dissipating the lower frequency background murmur of the audience while perfectly reflecting the higher frequencies of the human voice upward. The result was a natural sound system that projected the nuanced inflections of an actor's speech to an audience of thousands. But this engineering marvel served a purpose far deeper than simple audibility. The plays performed here were not mere entertainment. They were profound religious rituals dedicated to Dionysus, exploring the deepest questions of human fate, divine justice, and moral order. The acoustic precision of the space ensured that these complex dialogues about hubris and redemption were not just heard, but felt by every single person in attendance, creating a powerful, shared emotional experience. As theatre historian Peter Arnott observed, this auditory immersion was central to the ritual's power. When the hero's lament or the chorus's warning echoed with such clarity across the vast space, it felt as though the universe itself was speaking, reinforcing the play's moral lesson with an undeniable physical presence. The architecture transformed a story into a collective revelation. This fusion of drama and acoustics illustrates how ancient rituals extended far beyond formal worship in a temple. They permeated cultural storytelling, using the physics of sound to bind a community together in reflection. The audience did not just watch a performance, they participated in a sonic event that validated their shared values and connected them to the divine narratives that shaped their world. A chant echoing from a mountainside does more than fill the air with sound. It fills the human mind with a profound sense of the divine. At the Inca citadel of Machu Picchu, the temples are not just placed upon the landscape, they are woven into its acoustic fabric. The Intihuatana stone, a ritual pillar used to tie the sun, is positioned so that voices from the ceremonial plaza would bounce off the surrounding granite peaks. The resulting echo does not return as a simple repetition. It comes back transformed, layered, seeming to originate not from the people, but from the mountains and the sky. This was a deliberate auditory illusion, making the gods themselves feel like active participants in the ceremony. When a community hears its own prayers answered by the very earth, belief ceases to be an abstract idea and becomes a visceral, shared reality. The psychological impact of this is immense. The pioneering psychologist William James extensively studied how powerful sensory stimuli in a group setting can trigger collective emotional states. A shared, overwhelming auditory experience, like a thunderous echo that seems supernatural, can synchronize the feelings of a crowd. This phenomenon, known as emotional contagion, is a powerful social glue. The awe you feel is mirrored on the face of the person next to you, and that shared awe amplifies your own, creating a feedback loop of powerful emotion. This is not a random occurrence, it is a psychological mechanism expertly leveraged by ancient ritual. The architecture and the landscape were tools to engineer this specific mental state. The goal was to move people beyond individual thought and into a collective emotional experience where joy, fear, and reverence were felt as one. This shared psychological journey forged an unbreakable bond within the community. Your personal faith was reinforced by witnessing the identical, overwhelming reaction in your neighbors. The ritual acoustics served a dual purpose. They convinced you of a divine presence while simultaneously binding you more tightly to the people around you. This fusion of spiritual and social engineering ensured the stability and continuity of the culture itself. The stones were not just amplifying sound, they were amplifying belief, using the hidden pathways of the human mind to turn a gathering of individuals into a unified whole. A deep chant within a Buddhist cave temple creates an intimate, focused resonance, while a single voice in a Gothic cathedral swells into a vast heavenly chorus. These two worlds, East and West, developed profoundly different philosophies for using architectural acoustics in ritual. The rock-cut caves of Ajanta in India are a masterpiece of inward-focused design. Carved into a horseshoe-shaped cliff face, their interiors are intimate and enclosed. The walls are not smooth and reflective, but often covered with intricate murals and sculpted surfaces that break up sound waves. This creates a short, clear reverberation, a sonic environment perfect for the meticulous, meditative chanting of Buddhist sutras. The sound does not echo for seconds on end. Instead, it remains close and personal, encouraging the monk to turn his attention inward, to focus on the precise meaning and vibration of each syllable without auditory distraction. The architecture supports a journey into the self. In stark contrast, the soaring vaults of a medieval cathedral like Chartres were engineered for a completely different effect. Their immense height and hard, smooth surfaces of stone and glass are designed to maximize reverberation. A spoken prayer can linger in the air for 8 or 10 seconds, blending with the notes of a pipe organ and the voices of the choir. This creates a thick, continuous tapestry of sound, an overwhelming auditory experience that seems to emanate from the building itself. The individual voice is lost, absorbed into a collective, heavenly noise that symbolizes the vastness of God's kingdom and the smallness of the individual before it. The goal is not introspection, but ecstatic surrender to a power greater than oneself. Acoustic researcher Miriam Kohler notes that these variations are not accidents. They are direct reflections of deep-seated cultural and spiritual priorities. The Eastern tradition, in this context, often seeks enlightenment through inner stillness and the disciplined quieting of the mind. A long, confusing echo would be a hindrance to that meditative clarity. The Western tradition, at that time, often emphasized the awe-inspiring power and majesty of a singular god, and the grand echo served as a tangible, physical manifestation of that divine glory. One design fosters a personal, interior journey. The other constructs a communal, exterior revelation. Yet for all their differences, both traditions arrived at the same profound understanding. Both manipulated the physics of sound to achieve a common goal, to lift human consciousness out of the mundane and into a state of transcendence. The tools and the aesthetic outcomes were worlds apart, but the underlying human impulse was identical. This was not a matter of one being more advanced than the other. It was a brilliant adaptation of acoustic principles to local beliefs, materials, and spiritual needs. The universal truth lies in the result, in the way a carefully shaped space can make a simple human sound feel like a bridge to another world entirely. The metallic jingle of a sistrum did more than keep time in an Egyptian temple. This sacred rattle, shaken in the hands of a priestess, was an acoustic key designed to unlock the power of the space around it. Its sound, a cascade of tiny, bright chimes, was perfectly suited to the stone halls where rituals for goddesses like Hathor were performed. The hard, reflective surfaces of the temple walls would catch those high-frequency metallic sounds and amplify them, creating a shimmering, ethereal aura that seemed to hang in the air. Music archaeologist Anna Friederich-Potengowski explains that ancient instruments were not generic noisemakers. They were meticulously crafted to resonate with the specific acoustic properties of their architectural settings. A deep, hide-covered drum would find its voice in a low, granite chamber, its thrumming pulse amplified into a bodily vibration. A bone flute's reedy whistle would be carried clearly by the curved walls of a subterranean passage. Each instrument was chosen and its sound tailored to enhance a specific symbolic meaning within the ritual, turning the architecture into a collaborative musician. This synergy between live performance and built environment created an incredibly flexible ritual tool. The soundscape of a ceremony was not fixed. It could be dynamically modulated by the priests and musicians to guide the emotional journey of the participants. A ceremony might begin with the soft, scattered jingles of the sistrum, creating an atmosphere of anticipation as the goddess was invoked. As the ritual reached its climax, deep horns and a chorus of voices would join in. Their lower frequencies triggered the space's natural resonance, building the sound into an overwhelming, immersive wave. Then, for a moment of intimate prayer, the music might drop away to a single, sustained chant, allowing the lingering reverberation of the hall itself to become the primary sound. This was a form of ancient sound engineering, a way to use architecture and instrumentation in concert to compose a spiritual experience in real time. The stones provided the permanent acoustic potential, and the live performers acted as the conductors, shaping that potential into a powerful, customizable narrative of belief. The Greek myth of Echo is more than a story of unrequited love. It is a profound exploration of how ancient people understood the nature of sound. Cursed by Hera to only repeat the last words spoken by others, the nymph Echo embodies the acoustic phenomenon that bears her name, a reflection of voice from a hard surface. Her eventual fading away until only her voice remains poetically captures the experience of a sound decaying into silence within a stone chamber. This was not mere fantasy. As folklorist Adrian Mayer suggests, such myths likely served as conceptual blueprints, a culture's way of encoding its acoustic observations into memorable narratives. The story of Echo gave a name and a spirit to a mysterious force of nature, making it comprehensible and sacred. It provided a divine reason for why a shout returns from a cliff face, and in doing so, it may have directly inspired builders to create spaces where this very phenomenon could be harnessed and controlled. The myth gave them a goal: to build a home for the nymph, to trap her voice in stone for ritual purposes. This pattern of acoustic symbolism repeats across the globe. In the Americas, legends tell of talking mountains and stones that sing. For the builders of Mesoamerican pyramids, these were not just fables, they were design challenges. The quest to make the temple of Kukulkan chirp like the Quetzal bird was an attempt to physically realize a cultural story, to prove the legend true through architectural genius. When a community heard that chirping echo during a ceremony, they weren't just hearing a clever acoustic trick, they were witnessing a myth come to life. The architecture validated the story, and the story, in turn, sanctified the architecture. This created a powerful, self-reinforcing cycle of belief. The ritual became more potent because it felt predestined, as if the builders were merely uncovering a divine truth that the myths had always hinted at. The space was not just designed, it was fated. This deep intertwining of narrative and stone transformed a physical acoustic event into a cultural touchstone. The echo was no longer just a reflection of sound. It was the voice of a goddess, the call of a god, a direct line to a story that defined their world. By embedding these symbolic narratives into the landscape, the architects ensured that every ritual was not a solitary act, but a single, resonant note in a timeless, sacred song. A three-dimensional digital ghost of an ancient Mayan palace now exists inside a supercomputer. At the site of Palenque in Mexico, archaeologists and acoustic engineers have joined forces, using laser scanners to map every surface of a ceremonial structure with millimeter precision. This data builds a perfect virtual replica, a digital playground where sound waves can be released and tracked, their journey through the ancient corridors made completely visible. When researchers simulate a human voice chanting inside this model, the results are startling. The sound does not bounce around chaotically. Instead, the stone walls and vaulted ceilings guide the voice, focusing its energy and amplifying a very specific, low resonant frequency. This is the modern proof of ancient intention. The chamber was not just built to be strong or beautiful, it was acoustically tuned, as acoustic engineer David M. Howard explains. This level of sonic optimization reveals an advanced empirical knowledge that shatters our old assumptions about so-called primitive technology. The builders of Palinque may not have had the mathematics to describe sound waves, but they possessed a deep, intuitive mastery of how those waves would behave in the space they created. They learned through generations of careful listening, of chanting in half-built rooms and adjusting the angles of stones until the room itself began to sing back to them. This modern rediscovery does more than deepen our appreciation for the past. It actively inspires the future. The same principles of sound reflection and resonance found at Palinque are now being studied by architects designing modern concert halls and meditation spaces. The ancient goal of creating a deeply immersive, emotionally powerful sonic environment is exactly what today's designers strive for. By looking back at these sustainable, stone-built acoustic marvels, we find elegant solutions that use natural materials and passive design, avoiding the need for complex electronic amplification. The forgotten architects were not just building for their gods, they were crafting a legacy of sonic wisdom, a hidden knowledge now being reawakened by the very technology they could never have imagined. A single misplaced footstep can change an echo forever. The delicate soundscapes of ancient sites are facing a silent crisis, one where the very act of admiration threatens to erase the phenomenon we seek to understand. The Lascaux Cave in France, adorned with breathtaking prehistoric art, possesses a unique acoustic signature that scholars believe was integral to the rituals performed there. Yet the breath and body heat of thousands of visitors began to foster destructive mold growth, forcing authorities to seal the original cave permanently. A precise replica was built nearby, but while it captures the visual splendor, its acoustic soul is a mere approximation. The original sonic environment, a key to understanding the cave's full ritual power, is now inaccessible, locked away for its own survival. This is the central ethical dilemma of acoustic heritage. How do we preserve something as intangible as sound when the source of that sound is so physically vulnerable? Preservationists like Sarah may argue for a paradigm shift in how we view these spaces. They are not just static monuments to be photographed, but living records of human sensory experience. Their acoustic properties are as much a part of the historical record as the carved reliefs or painted bison on the walls. The challenge is that sound is not a pigment or a stone. It is a behavior of the space, a dynamic interaction between architecture, air, and human presence. Too many visitors can subtly alter the humidity and temperature within a chamber, which in turn changes how sound waves travel. The slow accumulation of dust on a resonant surface, or the microscopic wear on a step that creates a perfect chirping echo, can degrade these ancient sonic instruments beyond repair. The ethical path requires a difficult balance between public access and strict conservation. Non-invasive monitoring technologies offer a promising solution. Sophisticated laser scans and sensitive audio mapping can create a perfect digital fingerprint of a site's acoustics without ever touching a stone. This data not only preserves the sound for future study, but also allows for the creation of immersive virtual experiences, granting access without physical intrusion. This stewardship extends beyond science into a profound cultural responsibility. These spaces are a testament to a universal human impulse, the drive to shape our world not just for shelter, but for the spirit. To lose their voice is to lose a fundamental chapter in the story of human creativity. We are tasked with being not just caretakers of stone, but guardians of an echo, ensuring that the whispers of the past continue to resonate for the listeners of tomorrow. The same resonant principles that once animated sacred rituals are now finding a new voice in the steel and glass of our modern world. Architects and designers have begun to look back, understanding that the ancient mastery of sound offers powerful solutions for contemporary life. In places like the St. Ignatius Chapel in Seattle, architect Stephen Hall explicitly channeled the acoustic mysteries of sites like the Hypogeum. He designed the chapel not just as a visual form, but as a vessel for light and sound, with walls and ceilings shaped to gather whispers and music into a soft, enveloping resonance that promotes quiet contemplation. This is not mere historical imitation. It is the application of a timeless truth that certain sonic environments can directly influence human emotion and well-being. The goal is no longer to communicate with gods, but to create sanctuaries from the relentless noise of modern existence, spaces where clarity and calm can be restored. This ancient wisdom is being systematically reverse-engineered for our time. The precise stone curves of Greek theaters inform the designs of modern outdoor amphitheaters, ensuring that every seat is the best seat in the house without a single electronic speaker. The Maya's understanding of sound diffusion on stepped pyramids is studied to design better public plazas and stadiums, where announcements can be heard clearly by thousands without a screeching public address system. Even the concept of the whispering gallery, perfected in the Pantheon, is being adapted for intimate performance spaces and museums, allowing for clear, direct sound transmission in a way that feels magical and personal. This continuity reveals a profound shift in how we view our built environment. We are moving beyond treating buildings as silent, functional boxes and starting to see them as partners in our sensory experience. The ancient quest to shape sound for spiritual awe is now a quest to shape it for human health, using the physics of reflection and resonance to combat noise pollution and auditory fatigue in our cities. By learning from these forgotten architects, we are rediscovering how to build a world that doesn't just house us, but that truly listens, and in doing so, helps us hear ourselves once more. The idea that these ancient sonic wonders were happy accidents is perhaps the most persistent myth of all. It suggests our ancestors simply stumbled upon these acoustic effects rather than engineering them with purpose. Yet the evidence etched into the stones tells a very different story. Look closely at the walls of the Maltese temples like those at Hal Saflieni. Their surfaces are not rough and irregular. They are carved into precise concave curves, angles that a random builder would have no reason to create. These are not the marks of haphazard construction. They are the signatures of calculated acoustic design, shapes specifically known to focus and amplify sound waves. This was not a one-off discovery. From the stepped pyramids of the Maya to the hemispherical dome of the Pantheon, we see the same patterns of intentionality. The builders repeated these successful acoustic forms across continents and centuries, refining them over generations. This was a cumulative science, a body of knowledge passed down through guilds of master craftsmen. They may not have had the vocabulary of frequency and wavelength, but they possessed a deep, empirical understanding of how sound behaves. They learned by listening, by testing, by chanting in a half-built chamber, and then adjusting the angle of a wall until the room sang back to them with the desired resonance. Skeptics often underestimate this patient, observational genius, dismissing it as primitive because it was not written in formal equations. But recent studies using laser scanning and acoustic modeling are proving the builders right. Digital reconstructions reveal that these chambers resonate most powerfully at very specific, low frequencies, frequencies that align perfectly with the range of the human voice in chant. The probability of this occurring by chance in so many diverse structures is vanishingly small. These were not accidental spaces, they were instruments tuned as deliberately as a violin. To dismiss their work as accidental is to ignore the profound connection they forged between the physical and the spiritual world. They were not just stacking stones, they were composing experiences, using the hidden architecture of sound to build bridges to the divine. Recognizing this deliberate artistry does not diminish their achievements, it elevates them, revealing a forgotten chapter of human ingenuity where the goal was not just to build for the eyes, but to construct for the ear and the soul. A supercomputer can now listen to a building that has been silent for 1,000 years. The emerging field of Acoustics is undergoing a revolution, powered by artificial intelligence and virtual reality that allow us to step directly into the sensory world of our ancestors. Projects like the Acoustics of Neolithic sites in Europe are not merely mapping stones, they are resurrecting soundscapes. By feeding precise laser scans of ancient monuments into advanced software, researchers can simulate exactly how a chant or a drumbeat would have traveled through a space, noting where echoes clustered and which frequencies were amplified. This is more than digital modeling, it is a form of time travel for the ears. We can virtually stand in the center of a stone circle at the moment of a solstice sunrise and hear for ourselves how the architecture transformed human sound into something transcendent. These tools are revealing patterns that the human ear alone could never detect. Artificial intelligence algorithms can analyze the acoustic data from hundreds of sites, searching for common design principles across continents and cultures. Early results suggest that certain resonant frequencies, particularly those in the range of a low male chant, were targeted with astonishing consistency. This points to a universal human discovery that specific sonic vibrations can directly alter consciousness and forge powerful social bonds. Researchers now predict that this ongoing exploration will reveal even more about how sound actively shaped human evolution itself. Did the shared, awe-inspiring experience of ritual acoustics help catalyze the development of language, music, and complex social structures? The potential is to rewrite chapters of history, not as a silent chronicle of objects, but as a vibrant narrative of sensory experience. We are on the verge of understanding ancient civilizations not just by what they left behind, but by what their world sounded like. This is the new frontier, a journey to recover the lost soundtrack of human belief. These ancient builders left us a legacy written not in words, but in waves of sound. From the oracle chamber in Malta to the whispering dome of the Pantheon, they proved that architecture could be a living instrument, transforming a simple chant into a divine presence and a human whisper into a sacred secret. Their mastery was a global phenomenon, a hidden thread connecting cultures across oceans and millennia, all united by a single discovery. By shaping stone to control resonance, reflection, and reverberation, they learned to amplify not just volume, but belief itself, forging an unbreakable link between the physics of sound and the psychology of the human spirit. This forgotten knowledge is no longer lost. Modern science, through laser scans and acoustic modeling, is now confirming the incredible intentionality behind these designs, revealing a sophisticated empirical science that guided the hammers and chisels of the past. The enduring power of these spaces continues to resonate today, inspiring architects to create modern sanctuaries that heal and calm, proving that the ancient quest for sonic awe is as relevant as ever. You can still stand in these places and feel it for yourself. Visit a preserved site where the air still hums with ancient frequencies, or explore a virtual reconstruction that lets you hear the past with new ears. As we continue to uncover the hidden soundtrack of history, we are reminded of a profound and timeless truth. The human desire to connect with something greater than ourselves is often built into the very stones around us, waiting only for us to listen. Thank you for joining this journey into the echoes of